Hi, welcome to the Dirty Little Dozen, a 12-video discussion of the changes within the PMBOK 4th and 5th editions. The new PMBOK just came out. What are we looking at as users of the manual?
As a matter of fact, yes, it did come out just in January of 2013, copyright date January 2013, and the manual is up to 589 pages. Huge. It's up to 47 processes from 42, and after reading the book, there's about 7 major areas of change, from consistency to stakeholder engagement. As a matter of fact, there's a new knowledge area on stakeholders and stakeholder management. Another change is the interpersonal skills of the project manager, which we'll get into in another little video. There's been an increased emphasis on a standard for project management, which they refer to as Annex A1. There's a completely new glossary. There's a key benefit or a key purpose now for every single process and every single process group. And overall, they did a really good job, at least in my opinion, of making the manual easier to read, easier to understand, and less vague. So what did they use for inputs to some of these changes? Well, they did a whole bunch of review and looking at various different elements to make the very consistent. So the standard for program management and the standard for portfolio management are now very consistent with the PMBOK guide. They also recently have been working with the ISO group to create the guidelines for project management, or the ISO 21500. They also took a little bit of input from the Association for Project Management from the UK, as well as the International Project Management Association, or the IPMA. PMI has also recently released a project management lexicon, or a glossary, so to speak, of all of their terms, and that's now consistent across all of their manuals. They also took a look at the various new approaches that have come up recently, from agile project management to theory of constraints, critical chain management, and critical path management. So all of those are the areas that have changed within the PMBOK. A lot to cover, and a lot of really good stuff in there. So first, let's take a look at what they did to the intro. Now let's look into each of the various chapters. In the Introduction to Project Management chapter, they really beefed up the elements of communications with stakeholders and managing stakeholders. They've also changed the content and the description around the relationship between projects, programs, portfolios, and they're calling that organizational project management. They've increased knowledge and information around business value, and they have greatly increased the interpersonal skills that the project manager needs to use. In the 4th edition, it was under Appendix G. Now it's up in the introduction, as well as one of the appendices in the back. But they've added some more interpersonal skills necessary for the project manager, from trust building to coaching and mentoring, and conflict management and conflict resolution. In Chapter 2, where they're talking about the organizational influence on project management, they've swapped the order of this chapter. They wanted to make sure that they talked about the cultural awareness and global and virtual nature of teams, and the role that the project manager needs to play, as well as how to structure the team before they get into the influences on project management, from governance and stakeholder management to the newer life cycles, being agile, which they're calling adaptive, and then they also have the iterative cycles and the predictive life cycles, which is kind of like the waterfall, so to speak. And they've done a pretty good job of coming up with some project success criteria, and the fact that the project manager is the one who's supposed to be able to do that. And this moves us into Chapter 3, about the PM processes. In Chapter 3, in the old edition, was a very confusing chapter. They tried to explain a lot about the different processes and how the processes all fit together and work together. They cleared all of that out. All of the individual steps in the processes are now what they're calling the Annex A1. That's the standard for project management, as referred to by PMI. What's left in Chapter 3 now is a really good discussion around the process groups. Each of the process groups now has a very specific, identifiable key purpose, and they've done a good job at explaining the differences between the type of project information that's out there, being work performance data, which is just raw data about the status of the project. The work performance information, which is an analysis of that raw data in context with what's going on. And then finally, the third element in work performance is around reports. And that's just purely a report. So that's really the overview of what's happening in the PMBOK guide at a high level, in the brush, in the general context of what's happening in the project world.